Hello everybody and welcome to OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today I'm here with the first of our XY on deck analysis videos as of Ancient Origins being released. I was lucky enough to get to a pre-release yesterday and picked up some pretty decent Ancient Origins cards, meaning that I can start bringing you deck analysis videos. I believe Joe's going to do the same. He's going to be printing some proxies off just to make sure we get as many videos out to you guys as possible. But yeah, we're going to start off today with a look at Lucario Crobat going into XY on. So we're going to start with 3 Lucario EX. Lucario is the main attacker of the deck. All 3 attacks are really useful. Missile Jab, ignoring resistance. Obviously, Mega Rayquaza is a thing. So Missile Jab, ignoring resistance is really useful. Corkscrew Smash is like my favourite attack at the moment in general, just because it's so good. With the lack of really good draw support we've got now since N has been rotated, Corkscrew Smash is really good, and it's 2 for 60, and it can be buffed by all of the fighting toys. This Corkscrew Smash is such a strong attack. And it's the attack that you're going to probably be using a lot of the time, because in all honesty, Corkscrew Smash can actually just finish off EXs just as well as the final attack, Somersault Kick, 3 for 100, just simple 3 for 100. But sometimes you are going to want to power up Somersault Kick just to finish off any more EXs that you, you can actually one-shot EXs with Somersault Kick, so anything like that, especially with the Crobats as well. We've then got 3 Hawlucha. Hawlucha is another really good card at the moment. There's so many X's about. So Flying Press doing 60 straight away, and then with all the fighting toys getting up to 120 just for 1 strong energy. It's really good. Plus Crobat support. This attack can do insane numbers. And again, another really good attacker against Rayquaza, because it ignores resistance as well. So you really just punish the Rayquaza player. They put a lot of pressure on you, but you're doing huge chunks of damage, and they're only taking 1 prize for each Hawlucha that you give them. So another really good attacker, and it can work really well with some combos with Hex Maniac that I'm going to talk about later on. We've then got a 4-3-2 Crobat line. The Crobat is, well, the Golbats and Crobats are really good for just getting just that right amount of damage to be able to either efficiently one-shot or two-shot an EX, or even just a normal Pokemon. It's really, really useful. Then, unfortunately, we lose the Free Flight Zubat in the rotation, so Zubats do now have 1 retreat, but if you're starting with Zubat and you're going first, it really doesn't matter a lot of the time, because you're going to be looking for your Golbats anyway, and both Golbat and Crobat have free retreat. So whilst it's not a free retreater like it used to be, it's not too bad starting with Zubat. We also run a switch in here, so there are ways to get out if you are going second and you start with Zubat. But it's definitely not too bad. Golbat again and Crobat, I suppose, both just really good for dealing the extra hit points of damage to be able to knock out any real threats on your opponent's board. You can also, because Crobat's colourless, you can also skill dive to again finish off anything that you've damaged and then they've retreated, or maybe you've just been damaging the bench. So yeah, Crobat is really good, especially as it's only 1 colourless energy. Finally, we've got 2 Shaymin EX. With Corkscrew Smash, you only really need 2, because you're drawing with your attack as well. The Shaymin EX are really just used early on to try and get into your Zubats and Golbats relatively early. Obviously, setup is such a good ability. You can use Sky Return if you really have to, but because we don't run double colourless or anything, it's really awkward to set up because you waste 2 attachments, and it's only 30 damage, and you can't use the strong energy either. So this is probably the deck's worst starter, but we have got a lot of other Pokemon that you can start with that are much better than this, so you're not going to be starting with Shaymins too often. Again, setup is really useful because we've lost a lot of the good supporters, mainly N, but because of Corkscrew Smash drawing up to 6 as well, you only really need 2 in here, because you're only going to be using them early game because you've already got the late game draw in the Lucario as well. On to trainers, we have 4 Sycamore, Pretty much staple and everything still, just so strong. And for Karina, again, anything fighting, you're pretty much always going to be running for Karina. For Karina is getting you your Lucario, and there's a couple of one-off items in here that is really good turn 1 with Karina, just to sort of disrupt your opponent a little bit. Karina obviously gets you the Hawluchas as well. You can get items, you can get like ball search with this, and it's sometimes okay to just like Karina for a level ball or something. But there are other ways of being able to, well, you can just draw into the level balls usually with the Shaymins, but level ball is always a decent search to get with, well, a decent card to get with Karina, because it gets you effectively a fighting Pokemon and a bat at the same time. We've then got 2 Fan Club. Fan Club's really useful for getting the bats out early, and is an immediate -1 for your hand if you're going for a Shaymin, because you drop the Fan Club, you get 2 cards, one of them being Shaymin, one of them being probably like a bat or something like that. And you then can get yourself 1 extra card with the Shaymin. You don't really need more than 2, and in the late game they're relatively dead. But later on in the game you don't really need supporters, so it's another really good way of just double checking what you've still got in your deck and deck thinning, things like that. But you definitely don't need more than 2, because there is ball search to get out the bats, and the deck draws a lot of cards relatively early. So you are able to draw into the bats relatively often. We then have 2 Lysander. This could probably go down to 1, but I'm keeping it at 2 at the moment, just because I think Gengar, going into X and Y on, Gengar will be a relatively strong play, even if it drops in play. I think Gengar is a relatively strong play at the moment. So Lysander is really good against Gengar, just because they hit and switch. You can bring them back up and deal a huge chunk of damage to them, and then your bats can finish them off later on. Lysander just always really useful anyway. So I think 2 is probably an okay number. You could try dropping it down to 1, but I'm happy with 2 at the moment. We've then got 1 AZ and 1 Hex Maniac. The AZ is pretty much just for the bats and and picking up a Shaymin again. You're not going to use it in many other situations. I suppose it can be used as a switch to get out of the active, and it can be used as healing, but a lot of the time Lucario is going to have at least 2 energy on it, and probably a tool as well. So AZ can sort of cost you quite a lot of resources if you use an AZ on a Lucario, so it's primarily going to be used for bats and sometimes Shaymins as well if you need a couple of extra cards. And then 1 Hex Maniac, one of the stars of Ancient Origins. Hex Maniac is such a good card. Stopping Vileplume's item lock is really important, just to be able to get 1 turn of all of the items you need. The combos I was talking about earlier on with Hawlucha, because you shut off all abilities, you actually shut off Hawlucha's Flying Spirit. Sorry, Shining Spirit. Meaning that he then hits Manectric for weakness. Manectric, another good card that I think going into Ancient Origins or X and Y on will be a relatively decent play. You then play the Hex Maniac, and you can shut off your own Shining Spirit and deal double damage to Manectrics, which is really cool, because they often don't expect it. You just attach like a Strong and a Muscle Band to a Hawlucha. They expect you to be two-shotting them. You can just drop the Hex Maniac and actually one-shot them, which is really, really strong, and for only 1 prize as well. And then obviously Hex Maniac, like I said, really good for stopping item lock with, I guess both Trevenant, but mainly Vileplume. Especially if you've got like a VS Seeker in hand, you can play the Hex Maniac, VS Seeker the Hex Maniac back into your hand, and because there's no more N, you now are guaranteed, well, pretty much guaranteed to have that Hex Maniac next turn, meaning that you can then get another turn of items, and if you can find yourself another VS Seeker, you can sort of chain them for 2 or 3 turns to be able to stop your opponent's item lock completely. We then have 3 VS Seeker. This could be what you put in instead of the second Lysander. You could probably go up to 4 VS Seeker. It's just a space issue why I've only got 3. Again, just a pretty staple card. You're probably going to see at least 3 or 4 of in most decks that aren't item locking themselves. 2 Ultra Ball and 2 Level Ball. The Ultra Balls are pretty much solely for Shaymins and Crobats. You can get other things if you need them desperately, but Crobats and Shaymins, this is the only real way to, well, this is the only way to search the Crobat, and it's one of the only ways you can search for the Shaymin. And obviously Ultra Ball works really well with Shaymin because you're discarding 2 cards from your hand and getting the Shaymin, so it's an immediate sort of extra couple of cards usually. And then the 2 level balls, these are old school level balls. They are really good for the bats because they get the Zubat and the Golbat, so that's a searchable 20 damage. And also they get Hawluchas, which is really strong, because you can set Hawlucha up in a turn, you can get the Hawlucha, and you've theoretically against an EX got a searchable 60 damage instead. So yeah, level balls are really strong. I wouldn't want more than 2 because of the 4-3-2 backline, which is a bit of a weird backline, but I think 2 is a good number because it means that you can efficiently search out for your bats, but you're not always going to have them in hand when you've got all of your bats out and they're sort of dead cards. We've then got 2 Trainers Mail. This is just for sort of looking through for any items that you might need. It's not needed. These 2 cards could definitely be 2 of your preferred draw trainers like roller skates or anything. I think Trainers Mail is the best one, just because it's sort of semi-search, and there's quite a few trainers in the deck, and you're getting rid of a lot of your Pokemon relatively quickly, so you're going to be drawing into more trainers than usual. The 2 Trainers Mails also can be pseudo supporters because a lot of the time you're going to be able to find a supporter or a VS Seeker, just because of how quickly you're going through the deck. So 2 Trainers Mails definitely, I think, important. You could substitute them in for 2 other cards of your choice. I suppose these 2 cards are 2 of the cards that are the least valuable in the deck, but for me, if there's 2 slots left, I think 2 Trainers Mail is where I would put what I'd put in those 2 slots. And then onto the one-off trainers, we have 1 Professor Letter and one Professor's Letter and 1 Switch. Both really good cards with Karina turn 1. If you start with something like a Shaymin, you can switch out. Obviously the bats no longer have free retreat, so the switch I feel is a lot more important. Before you wouldn't have needed a switch because you've got the 4 free retreating bats and you've got the 3 free retreating Hawlucha, but now we've only got the Hawlucha. I think switch is important. And then Professor's Letter basically guarantees you an energy turn 1 if you don't have one, because you've got Karina access to it, which means there's technically like 5 more letters, 5 more energy in the deck than you actually have, because you've got all of the energy, plus you've got 4 Karinas and a Professor's Letter. So there are 5 more outs to getting energy turn 1. So Professor's Letter is definitely important. And again, late game, if you haven't used it, it's always another good deck search if you can't quite remember exactly what you need or what you've run through. Tools-wise, we've got 3 Muscle Band. Muscle Band just because it's pretty much staple in all fighting decks. Boosting damage is really good, and it makes one-hit knockouts a lot easier, especially with the bats. Then another 2 one-offs. We've got 1 Headringer and 1 Focus Sash. Focus Sash is really, really good against things that one-shot you, like Mega Ray, Dragon Ray, anything like that. Anything that aims to one-shot you, if you stick a Focus Sash, even on something like a Hawlucha, it turns it into a 2-hit knockout if they can't deal damage to you in the first place. Ariados is probably going to see quite a bit of play. I've heard a lot of people hyping it, so that sort of devalues Focus Sash slightly, but I still think timed right, Focus Sash is definitely really good, especially on something like a Hawlucha, because it kind of acts a little bit like a Life Dew back in the days of old. So you'd have to take 2 turns to knock out a 1 prize Pokemon, which is kind of like a Life Dew, because you want to be dealing with 1 prize, like at least 1 prize a turn, but you're going down to 1 prize every 2 turns, just for 1 prize. So Focus Sash is definitely important. And then Headringer, again, another one of. I would love a second in here, but I think the 2 Trainers Mail are slightly more important. Headringer, another really good card with Karina turn 1, especially if you've got the energy. You can Headringer and sort of set your opponent back at least 1 turn, if not more so. Sometimes people elect to not even use that attacker if they've been Headringered. Or they might go into wasting resources, things like AZs, to just get rid of the Headringer. So Headringer is definitely a really good card, especially as a one-off, just because you can find it with Karina turn 1. And then finally we have 3 Fighting Stadium. Again, just another damage booster really. against EXs. The format is so EX heavy at the moment, so fighting stadium is definitely important. There's also a lot of stadium wars, so having 3 means you can bounce other stadiums and still have a couple in the deck, just in case you really need them. I don't think the deck needs 4 because I don't think the deck relies on having 4 all the time, because you can just drop them at the right time. You don't always need them in play. Things like Giant Plant Forest and Skyfield, you need in play a lot of the time, just because for like the bench space and stuff. But you can just drop this the second before you attack and then attack. So you definitely, I don't think you need 4, unless you really want to go hard against other stadiums, letting them play their stadium first and then always having 1 to bounce. But I think 3 is the right number at the moment. And finally, onto the energy, we have 4 strong and 6 fighting. Again, strong, just so strong, ironically. You'll pretty much put 4 in every fighting deck, just an extra 20 damage. So insane. Just for 1 energy attachment as well. And then 6 fighting means you've always got outs to energy. You don't mind getting rid of 1 or 2 early game. You can sometimes run out of energy with this deck. But if you manage your resources carefully, a lot of the time you'll have enough energy and you'll still be able to sort of search for 2 at a time with Professor's Letter, and you never really run out. So as long as you manage your resources carefully with these 6 energy, 6 is all you need. Some may think 6 is too high. I think 6 is the right number at the moment. But yeah, that is Lucario Crobat. Sort of similar to Lando Bats, but it's a lot more focused on the active Pokemon, obviously, because you can't spread the damage with the Lucario as you could with Landorus. But Landorus doesn't hit as hard in the active as Lucario, so I feel they've both got positives and negatives. I feel like this deck's going to be solid going into X and Y on. Not particularly because it's a good meta call, because there isn't a meta at the moment, but because it's naturally a good deck. It's naturally consistent. It naturally sort of puts counters on the field and takes quick prizes. So even if it turns out that it's not a very good deck, I think going into the format it'll be relatively strong, just because it's sort of a consistent list and a consistent deck that, with Corkscrew Smash and the Shamans, is always drawing through your deck. Hitting knockouts when you need to with the Crobats and obviously all the fighting toys. It's just got a lot of answers. So I think going into the format, whilst it in hindsight in a couple of months' time, it may not be that good of a play. I think at the moment Lucario, if we were going into X and Y on tomorrow, I think I'd probably play Lucario Bats, just because it's consistent and it deals a lot of damage at a very fast pace. But yeah, that is the first of our deck analysis videos for XY on as of Ancient Origins. We would love to hear what decks you guys want to see us make. It's going to be a little bit difficult for me and Joe over the next couple of weeks, just because we have some scheduling issues, but we should be able to get most of your requests done before or as of the release of Ancient Origins. But if not, they'll just be a couple of weeks delayed. But we will make sure that we've written down all the decks that we want to record, and there's about 14 at the moment, which is insane. So if you guys let us know what you guys want to see first, and we will try our hardest to get those deck lists to you. We're working on different deck lists every night, just to be able to give you guys content. But yeah, just leave a comment about what you would like to see, and we will see what we can do. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from OmniPoke, and I will see you in another video.